Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. I want you to think about the last time someone told you that you couldn't do it. The last time someone looked at you. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a friend you trusted with your dreams. And they said, that's not for you. Or maybe they didn't even say it out loud. Maybe it was just a look, a slight shake of the head, a side shake of the head, a sigh, a silence that said everything. I want you to feel that moment again. Now open your eyes, because I'm here to tell you today that that moment, that painful, humiliating, gut-wrenching moment, was not the end of your story. That moment was the beginning. And the only thing standing between where you are right now and where you are destined to be is not talent. It is not money. It is not connections. It is not even hard work alone. It is your attitude. Your attitude. And today we are going to talk about what that word really means. Not the dictionary definition, not the psychology textbook version. We are going to talk about what attitude means at 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't sleep because your bills are bigger than your bank account. We are going to talk about what attitude means when you've tried 5 times and failed 5 times and people around you are whispering that maybe it's time to quit. We are going to talk about what attitude means when life hits you so hard, so unexpectedly, so mercilessly, that you don't even know who you are anymore. Because that, my friends, is when attitude matters most. Let me tell you about a young boy. Born in the mountains of rural Kentucky in the early 1900s, his father died when he was 6 years old. 6 years old, his mother had to work. So this little boy became responsible for feeding and cooking for his younger brother and sister. By the time he was 10, he had already mastered several dishes because necessity demanded it, not because he wanted to, not because someone cheered him on, but because life gave him a role he didn't audition for, and he showed up anyway. He dropped out of school before he finished 6th grade. He worked dozens of jobs, farmed, drove a streetcar, studied law by correspondence, practiced as an attorney, sold insurance, operated a ferry boat across the Ohio River. He failed at almost every single one. He got into a fight with one of his own clients and ruined his law career. His business burned down. His personal life fell apart. He applied for a government job during the Great Depression and was rejected. The world was not kind to this man. Life was not generous. Opportunity did not knock loudly on his door. He was 62 years old. 62 years old. 62. Most people that age are thinking about retirement. Most people that age are looking back at what they've built. This man had almost nothing to show for 6 decades of living. He had a small pension check, $105 a month from Social Security. That was it. Purity. But he had something else. He had a recipe, a simple recipe for fried chicken. And he had an attitude, a belief so stubborn, so unreasonable, so almost embarrassingly persistent, that he drove from restaurant to restaurant across the United States, sleeping in his car, cooking his chicken for restaurant owners, asking them to partner with him. You know how many times he was rejected? 1009 times. 1009. Before he got his first yes, that man was Colonel Harlan Sanders. And you are sitting here today in a world where Kentucky Fried Chicken has over 25,000 restaurants in 145 countries. Now I want you to sit with that number for a second. 1009 rejections. If he had quit at 100, you'd have never heard his name. If he had quit at 500, you'd have never tasted his chicken. If he had quit at 1,000, just 9 short of his breakthrough, the world would have lost something remarkable. But he didn't quit, not because he didn't feel the rejection. I promise you he felt every single one. But his attitude, his internal compass, his orientation toward life would not let him stay down. That is what attitude does. It is not the absence of pain. It is the decision about what to do with the pain. Now I need you to understand something fundamental, something that changes everything once you really, truly understand it. Attitude is not a feeling, it is a choice. We have been taught, somewhere along the way, that attitude is something that happens to us. That when good things happen, we have a good attitude. When bad things happen, we have a bad attitude. That attitude is the thermometer. It just reads the temperature of our circumstances. But the greatest achievers in human history understood something different. They understood that attitude is the thermostat, not the thermometer. The thermostat doesn't just read the temperature, it sets it, it controls. It determines what the environment will be regardless of what is happening outside. You can be standing in the middle of a storm, and your attitude can create sunshine in your soul. You can be surrounded by people who doubt you, and your attitude can be the loudest voice in the room. You can be at the very bottom, financially, emotionally, physically, and your attitude can be the ladder that climbs you out. But here's the question nobody ever asks, and it's the most important question in this whole conversation. How do you build an attitude like that? How does a person develop that kind of internal strength? That kind of unreasonable, persistent, almost irrational belief in themselves and their future? Because I know somebody in this room, and I'm talking to you specifically, not the person next to you. You, I know that you've tried the positive thinking thing. You've tried the affirmations, you've read the books, you've watched the videos, and maybe it worked for a while. Maybe you felt that fire for a day, 2 days, a week, and then life happened again, and you fell back into the same patterns, the same doubts, the same voice in the back of your head that says, who do you think you are? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about it honestly, because nobody wants to admit that it exists, but everyone hears it. That voice. You know the one I mean. The one that sounds strangely like you, but says things that you would never say to a friend. The voice that replays your failures like a highlight reel on loop. The voice that takes your biggest dream and immediately starts listing reasons why it won't work. The voice that compares you to everyone around you and always finds you lacking. That voice has a name in psychology. It's called the inner critic. But I like to call it something else. I call it the echo of someone else's fear. Because here's the truth. And this is one of the most important things I will say today, so I need you to really hear it. The voice that tells you that you're not enough, that voice was not born with you. You were not born doubting yourself. Watch a 2-year-old child. Watch the absolute fearlessness, the certainty. The I can climb this, I can do this, I can be this. That is your original self. That is who you were before the world started editing you. The voice of doubt was installed by criticism, by comparison, by disappointment. By well-meaning people who were themselves afraid and passed that fear on to you like a hand-me-down coat that never quite fit. And you've been wearing that coat for so long, you forgot it's not yours. Attitude is about taking off the coat. Attitude is about going back to that 2-year-old fearlessness and choosing it consciously, deliberately, as an adult who has seen hard things and decided to move forward anyway. I want to tell you about a woman named Wilma, born in 1940 in the small town of Clarksville, Tennessee. The 20th of 22 children in a poor family. At 4 years old, she contracted polio, the disease that paralyzed and killed children across America before the vaccine. She survived, but her left leg was paralyzed. The doctors put her in a metal brace. They told her mother, very simply and very professionally, that this child would never walk normally. Her mother could have accepted that. The doctors were experts. The brace was real. The limp was real. The diagnosis was real. But her mother had an attitude, and she installed it in her daughter. Every single week, her mother took her 50 miles to Nashville for physical therapy. 50 miles in a time when that was not easy, when roads were not what they are today, when a black family in the American South faced obstacles that most of us cannot even imagine. Every week, for years. And at home, her brothers and sisters helped her exercise her leg. Every day. Not because a professional was watching. Because they believed in her. By age 12, she removed the brace herself. She walked without it. The doctors were astonished. By age 16, she was competing in track. At age 20 in the 1960 Rome Olympics, Wilma Rudolph became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in a single Olympic Games. 3 gold medals in sprinting. The woman they said would never walk normally. And here's what she said afterward. She said, and these are her words, "The doctors told me I would never walk, but my mother told me I would. I believed my mother." Attitude is what you choose to believe when 2 different voices are telling you 2 completely different things about who you are and what is possible. Attitude is which message you let take root in your heart and grow into your reality. Now let me take you somewhere different, because I don't want to only give you the stories of the famous ones, the Olympians, the colonels, the legends, because sometimes when we hear those stories, we unconsciously create a distance. We say, That was a special person. I'm not special like that. And that protective distance keeps us comfortable and stuck at the same time. So let me tell you about somebody you might know. No. In fact, let me tell you about somebody who might be you. There's a person who woke up this morning and before their feet even hit the floor, the weight of everything descended on them. The debt, the relationship that's falling apart, the job they hate but can't leave, the dream they've postponed for so long it's starting to feel like someone else's dream, the health scare they're afraid to deal with, the loneliness that doesn't go away even in a room full of people. This person didn't spring out of bed with energy and purpose, energy and purpose. They lay there for an extra 10 minutes, staring at the ceiling, having a silent conversation with themselves that went something like, what's the point? What's actually going to change today? I've tried before. It didn't work. I'm tired. I'm tired. And this is the moment I want to zoom in on. And then they got up anyway. They didn't feel powerful. They didn't feel motivated. They didn't feel like a person on their way to greatness, but they got up. They showed up to their life even when their life felt like it didn't deserve their presence. That is attitude, not the Instagram version, not the highlight reel, the real version. The quiet, unglamorous, nobody is watching version of attitude that looks like a person choosing one more day when every cell in their body is arguing for surrender. I need you to give that person credit many more times than you realize. You have survived 100% of your worst days. You are still here. That is not an accident. That is not luck. That is the attitude in you that refused to let go even when you thought you had. Let's talk about something that nobody in the motivational space talks about enough. And that is the relationship between attitude and identity. Because here's the thing that I've come to understand after years of studying human transformation, after listening to thousands of stories of people who changed their lives against all odds. The attitude doesn't change first. The identity changes first. What do I mean by that? I mean that you cannot consistently act in a way that conflicts with how you see yourself. You can override it temporarily. You can force yourself to do the right thing when it feels wrong. But eventually, if your identity says, I am a failure, your behavior will find its way back to failure. If your identity says, I am not the kind of person who succeeds, you will unconsciously sabotage every success that comes close to you. This is why you can go to a motivational seminar and feel on fire for 3 days and then slowly drift back to exactly where you were before. Not because the information was wrong, not because the speaker was a fraud, but because the fire didn't reach deep enough to change the story you tell about who you are. Attitude at its deepest level is an identity statement. It's not just I think positively. It is I am the kind of person who finds a way. It's not just I try hard. It is I am the kind of person whose persistence is non-negotiable. It's not just I believe in myself. It is I am someone whose belief in their potential is the most unshakable thing about them. And how do you build that identity? How do you rewrite a story about yourself that has been written and rewritten by years of experience? You do it through small proofs. You do it by making a promise to yourself and keeping it. A small promise, not the life-changing massive commitment, a small one. I will walk for 20 minutes today. And then you walk, and your brain registers. Oh, I said I would do something and I did it. That's a small deposit in the bank of self-trust. And the next day you make another small promise, and you keep it, another deposit. And slowly, not overnight, not in a weekend, but slowly, the way a river shapes a canyon, not with force but with persistence. Slowly, your identity begins to shift. The story begins to change. The attitude begins to rebuild itself from the inside out on a foundation of actual evidence. This is not the flashy version of transformation. This is the real version. This is the version that sticks. I want to talk about something that I consider to be the single greatest enemy of a powerful attitude. And it might surprise you because it's not failure. It's not failure. It's not hardship. It's not even the people who doubted you. The greatest enemy of a powerful attitude is comparison. We live in the most comparison-saturated era in human history. Every single day, through a small glowing rectangle that most of us carry in our pockets, we are exposed to the highlight reels of thousands of other people's lives. Their vacations, their bodies, their businesses, their relationships, their achievements, curated, filtered, and presented in the most flattering possible light. And we are comparing their highlight reel to our behind the scenes footage. They show us the trophy. We compare it to our effort. They show us the relationship on a perfect day. We compare it to ours on its worst one. They show us the business at its peak. We compare it to ours in its beginning. And this comparison does something devastating to attitude. It creates a feeling that is arguably the most toxic emotion for human growth. It creates the feeling that you are behind, that you are late, that somehow, while you were trying and struggling and figuring things out, everyone else was crossing finish lines and you missed some crucial starting gun that everyone else heard except you. You did not miss anything. Heard again, and I need you to receive this completely. You did not miss anything. Your race has a different track. Your timeline has a different schedule. Your story has a different arc. And the moment you truly understand that, the moment you stop measuring your chapter 3 against someone else's chapter 20, is the moment your attitude transforms from one of scarcity and desperation into one of purpose and power. Theodore Roosevelt said something that has been quoted so many times it has almost lost its power. But I'm going to say it again because it deserves to be heard fresh. Comparison is the thief of joy. But I want to add something to that. Comparison is not just the thief of joy. It is the thief of direction. Because when you're always looking sideways at what someone else is doing, you stop looking forward at where you are going. And a person without direction is not truly alive. They are just moving, busy but not purposeful, active but not intentional. Attitude requires direction. It requires the answer to the question, compared to who I was yesterday, am I better today? That is the only comparison that matters, not you versus the world, you versus who you were yesterday. Let me tell you about Viktor Frankl. Because if there is one human being in the 20th century who embodied the power of attitude in the face of conditions that most of us cannot even imagine, it is Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychiatrist, a man of extraordinary intellect, a man building a life and a career and a family. And then the Nazis came and everything was taken from him. His wife, his parents, his sister, his freedom, his dignity. He was sent to Auschwitz, then to other concentration camps. He experienced things there that I will not describe in detail because they are beyond the language of a motivational speech. They are beyond the language of anything. He was stripped of every external freedom that a human being can have. Every single one. And in the middle of that darkness, that absolute, systematic, deliberate destruction of his humanity, he made a discovery that changed the way we understand the human mind forever. He discovered that even when everything external is taken away, your possessions, your family, your freedom, your dignity, there remains one freedom that no one can take from you, the freedom to choose your attitude. He wrote about it in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which has sold over 12 million copies and has been called one of the most influential books in America. He wrote, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. I want you to let that land, really land. If Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz with nothing, absolutely nothing, could choose his attitude, what is our excuse? I'm not saying our problems aren't real. I'm not minimizing what you're going through. I know some of you are carrying things that feel impossible. I know some of you came into this room today barely holding it together. I see you. Your struggle is real. Your pain is valid. But you have the same freedom that Viktor Frankl had. The freedom to choose what you do with this. The freedom to choose what story you tell. The freedom to choose whether this moment defines you or refines you. That freedom is your attitude. And it belongs to no one but you. Now I want to shift and talk about something practical. Because I believe in giving you not just inspiration but tools. Not just fire but fuel that keeps burning after the fire cools. Let's talk about the architecture of attitude. What is it actually made of? What are its components? What are the building blocks that, when assembled correctly, create the kind of internal foundation that can weather any storm? The first component is belief, specifically belief in possibility. Not belief that everything will be easy. Not belief that you won't face obstacles. But belief, deep, unshakable, almost irrational belief, that the outcome you want is possible. That it has happened for other humans and therefore the universe has demonstrated that it is possible. And what is possible for one is possible for another, including you. And I want to address the people in the room who have been burned, the people who believed before and were disappointed, the people who had faith in the thing they hoped for didn't come through. I want to talk to you specifically because I know the temptation after that kind of disappointment is to protect yourself, to never fully believe again. To keep one foot out the emotional door so that when it falls apart, you didn't fully invest, so you're not fully hurt. I understand that impulse. It is human, it is protective, and it is also quietly, slowly, relentlessly killing your potential. Because here's what happens when you only half believe. You only half try. You only half commit. You hold back some of your energy, some of your creativity, some of your persistence in case it doesn't work. And that held back portion, that's often the portion that would have made the difference. So that's the extra mile that success lives on. And because you held it back, you came up just short. And then you said, see, I knew it wouldn't work. But it didn't work because you didn't fully believe. The belief is not just a nice feeling. The belief is the fuel that drives the engine. Without it, you don't go far enough to reach the destination. So the first building block of attitude is choosing to believe. Not naively, not blindly, but deliberately and completely in the possibility of what you're working toward. The second component is expectation. An expectation is different from belief. Belief is about what's possible. Expectation is about what you're prepared to receive. Some people believe success is possible in theory, but don't actually expect it for themselves. They have theoretical belief, but personal pessimism. Attitude requires aligning your expectation with your belief. It requires actually preparing yourself, mentally, emotionally, practically, to receive the thing you say you want. Because the universe, and I mean this both spiritually and psychologically, the universe responds to your expectation. The opportunities you see, the connections you make, the coincidences that seem to line up. These are not random. They are filtered through the lens of what you expect. When you expect good things, you see pathways to them. When you expect failure, you unconsciously select evidence for failure and pass over the evidence of possibility. This is not woo, this is psychology. This is the reticular activating system in your brain which filters millions of pieces of information every second and highlights what you have told it is important. When you shift your expectation, you literally reprogram what your brain shows you. You start seeing opportunities that were always there but invisible to the eye of doubt. The third component is persistence. And I could spend 3 hours on this alone. Persistence is not stubbornness. Persistence is not ignoring feedback. Persistence is the commitment to the goal even while remaining flexible about the path. And here's the thing about persistence that nobody tells you. It gets harder before it gets easier. The point of maximum doubt, the moment when everything in you screams, this is not working, give up, is almost always right before the breakthrough. Not figuratively, literally. The darkness is most intense right before dawn. And the people who change the world are the ones who hold on through that last dark stretch. Thomas Edison tried over 10,000 different materials before he found the right filament for the light bulb. He didn't fail 10,000 times. He discovered 10,000 ways that didn't work. And then he discovered the one that did. And every home in the world has been lit by that persistence ever since. The fourth component is gratitude. And I know when you're in the middle of struggle, gratitude feels like being told to smile during a storm. But hear me out. Gratitude is not denial. It's not pretending things are fine when they're not. Gratitude is the practice of acknowledging what is still good, still working, still present, even when much is broken. And it matters for attitude because attitude lives in the soil of your emotional state. It is very difficult to have a powerful, growth-oriented, possibility-focused attitude while also being consumed by resentment, bitterness, and the constant mental cataloging of everything that has gone wrong. Gratitude is the practice that keeps the soil of your inner life fertile enough for attitude to grow. The research on this is extraordinary, by the way. Studies consistently show that people who practice daily gratitude report higher energy levels, greater optimism, stronger immune function, deeper relationships, and here's the one that gets me, greater resilience in the face of hardship. Grateful people bounce back faster. Not because they don't feel the pain, but because they have a broader context in which to hold it. Let me tell you about a moment in my own life. A moment when I understood attitude not as a concept but as a lived, desperate, necessary thing. There was a time when everything I had built began to fall apart. Not slowly, the way some things unravel, all at once. The way a building comes down when the foundation cracks. My financial situation collapsed. My relationships were strained to breaking. My confidence, which I had always counted on as my greatest asset, simply vanished one morning. And I woke up in the middle of that wreckage and I genuinely thought, but maybe I'm just not meant for the life I imagined. I remember sitting in my car in a parking lot because I didn't want anyone to see me cry, and I just let it out. All of it. The grief of the dreams that seemed lost, the shame of the failures, the fear of what came next. And then, when I had nothing left to cry, something happened. Something quiet. It wasn't a thunderbolt. It wasn't a supernatural voice. It was just a thought. A small, almost fragile thought that surfaced from somewhere underneath all that pain. The thought was this: but I'm still here. Just that. I'm still here, still breathing, still capable of thought. Still, at the most fundamental level, alive and present and capable of choosing what came next. And from that thought, that tiny, defiant, almost absurd thought, something began to rebuild. Not overnight, not easily. But step by step, decision by decision, day by day, something began to grow out of the rubble. I'm telling you this not because I want you to feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that the person standing in front of you today, speaking these words, has sat in a parking lot crying in the dark. And attitude is not the thing that prevents those moments. Attitude is what you find when you reach the bottom of those moments and discover that you are not the wreckage. You are the person who survived the wreckage. And surviving is just the beginning. Now I want to talk about the people around you. Because no conversation about attitude is complete without addressing the environment in which your attitude either grows or dies. Jim Rohn, one of the wisest minds in the world of personal development, said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I know some of you have heard this before, but I want to push deeper than the surface of it today. Because the 5 people principle isn't just about who inspires you. It's about whose reality you unconsciously absorb. When you spend consistent time with people who believe the world is unfair and luck is the only path to success, that belief slowly infiltrates your own worldview. When you spend consistent time with people who are defeated, who have given up, who spend their conversations cataloging their complaints rather than building their futures. And I say this with love, because these are often people we care deeply about. That energy becomes the air you breathe. And you cannot grow in bad air. Now, I'm not telling you to abandon the people you love who are struggling. I'm not telling you to be cruel or cold or transactional in your relationships. What I am telling you is that you have to be intentional about who has access to your deepest self. Who do you share your dreams with? Because dreams are fragile things in their early stages. They need warmth and encouragement and protective care. A dream shared with a person who is filled with doubt and negativity is like a seedling planted in concrete. It doesn't matter how good the seed is. The environment determines whether it grows. Find your people, the ones who believe in possibility, the ones who celebrate your wins without jealousy, the ones who push you when you're about to quit, the ones whose presence makes you feel more capable, not less. These people exist. They are looking for you too. But you have to be willing to seek them out and cultivate those relationships with the same intentionality that you bring to any important project in your life. And here's something equally important: be that person for someone else. Because the beautiful paradox of attitude is that it multiplies when you give it away. When you become the voice of encouragement in someone else's life, when you become the person who says, I believe in you at the moment they need it most, something in you deepens. Your own belief becomes more real because you've spoken it. Your own attitude becomes more robust because you've committed to it publicly through your investment in another person. I want to talk about failure. Really talk about it. Not the comfortable, sanitized version where we say failure is just feedback and move on, but the real version, the version where failure hurts, where it costs you, where it leaves a mark. Because the truth about attitude and failure is this: a powerful attitude doesn't mean you fail less. It means you fail differently. You fail with information rather than shame. You fail forward rather than backward. You fail as a learner rather than as a loser. But you still fail. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Let's sit with that for a second. The greatest basketball player who has ever lived was told at 16 years old that he was not good enough for his school team. He was devastated. He went home and he cried. He has said this himself in interviews. He felt humiliated. He felt like a failure. And then he used that feeling as fuel. He trained harder than anyone else on that team. He arrived before them and stayed after them. He used the rejection not as evidence of his limitation, but as fuel for his transformation. And when he finally made the team and then made it to the NBA, and then won 6 championships, and then became the most iconic athlete of the 20th century, that rejection was the first brick in the foundation. But here's what I really want to draw your attention to. Jordan didn't just use the big failure as fuel. He used every small failure as fuel. Every bad shot, every game he lost, every time he was outplayed, he had a relationship with failure that was fundamentally different from most people. Where most people saw failure as a verdict, Jordan saw it as data. Where most people let failure shrink them, Jordan let it instruct him. That is attitude. The attitude that says, what can I learn from this, is more powerful than any talent, more powerful than any advantage. Because it means that every experience, every single one, no matter how painful, makes you better rather than bitter. And the choice between better and bitter, that's attitude. Let me talk to the ones who are tired. Because I see you. I know you're in here. You haven't given up, but you're running on empty. You're still going, but you're not sure how much longer your legs will carry you. You've been fighting for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like not to fight. You've been struggling for so long that struggle has started to feel like your permanent address. This part of the speech is for you. First, I want to tell you that it is okay to be tired. Tired is not the same as done. Tired is not the same as defeated. Tired just means you've been running. It means you've been in the game. And the game requires rest as much as it requires effort. One of the greatest mistakes we make in the conversation about attitude and success is equating hustle with worth. We create a culture where resting feels like quitting, where slowing down feels like losing. And so people push through exhaustion until they break completely, and then they can't go at all. A powerful attitude includes the wisdom to know when to refuel, when to be still, when to let the soil of your inner life rest so that new growth can come. Rest is not laziness, rest is strategy. The farmer who never lets the field lie fallow eventually produces nothing. The body that never sleeps eventually collapses. The mind that never rests eventually stops generating the kind of creative, clear thinking that breakthrough requires. So if you are tired today, give yourself permission to rest, not to quit, not to give up on the dream, but to pause, to breathe, to recover your strength so that when you rise again, and you will rise again, you rise with full power rather than on fumes. Second thing I want to say to the ones who are tired. The fact that you are still here is significant. Do not take that for granted. The fact that after everything you've been through, you are still in this room, still searching for something that helps you move forward, that says something profound about who you are. That is not weakness. That is one of the most courageous things a human being can do. To be battered by life and still be seeking light. To be disappointed and still be hoping. To be exhausted and still be asking how to find more strength. That is the seed of an extraordinary attitude. It just needs a little water and a little sun. And I hope that something in this room today provides both. Now let me talk about something that I think is the crown jewel of attitude. The thing that takes everything we've discussed and elevates it from personal philosophy to something that actually changes not just your life, but the world around you. Nothing is service. The most fulfilled people I have ever encountered, not the most successful by external measures, but the most genuinely, deeply, sustainably fulfilled, are people who have connected their attitude to something larger than themselves. People who have taken their persistence and their belief and their resilience and aimed it, not just at their own goals, but at serving others. Because here's what happens when attitude meets purpose. When the I can becomes I can so that I can help them. When the persistence is not just about achieving your own dream, but about creating something that improves life for someone else. Something shifts in the nature of the motivation itself. It becomes cleaner, deeper, more durable. Because when it's only about you, there are days when you don't care enough about yourself to keep going. but when it's about the child who needs you to succeed, about the community that will benefit from what you build, about the future that you are creating for people who can't yet see it. On those days, you find strength you didn't know you had. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. 27 years for a cause, for a belief, for a vision of a South Africa that treated all its people with dignity. And when he walked out of that prison in 1990, he did not walk out bitter. He walked out with his head high and his attitude intact. Because his attitude was connected to something so much bigger than his own comfort or his own freedom. It was connected to the freedom of an entire people. And that connection gave his attitude a power that imprisonment could not break. What are you connected to? What is the why beneath your what? What is the deeper purpose that lives underneath the goals you've set and the dreams you're chasing? Because when you find that, when you connect your attitude to your purpose, you become almost unstoppable. Not because nothing bad will happen, but because you have a reason to keep going that transcends your circumstances. I want to take you through something now, an exercise in imagination. And I want you to really participate. Don't just listen, feel it. I want you to imagine it's 10 years from now. 10 years. You've done the work. You built the attitude. You've stayed persistent through the moments of doubt. You've chosen belief over fear, gratitude over resentment, purpose over comfort. What does that life look like? Where are you living? What are you doing every day? Who are the people around you? What have you built? What have you overcome? What do people say about you? Not because you care about reputation, but because you have genuinely impacted lives. And more importantly, how do you feel? Not about your accomplishments, about yourself. Do you feel like you kept faith with the best version of who you could be? Do you feel the satisfaction of someone who showed up day after day, not perfectly but fully? Do you feel the quiet pride of someone who, when life tried to write them a story of limitation, picked up the pen and wrote their own? Now I want you to bring that image back with you, right now, into this moment, into today, because that person, that 10 years from now version of you, is not a fantasy. That person is waiting for you to decide to become them. And the decision happens not in 10 years. The decision happens right now, in this room, in this moment. Today's attitude is tomorrow's reality. The seeds you plant in your mind right now, the choices you make about what to believe and how to show up and what to do when it gets hard, those seeds will become the tree that 10-year future you lives in. Plant carefully, plant with intention, plant with intention, plant with the knowledge that what you water grows. Let me tell you one more story, and this one I want you to carry with you forever. There's an old story. They tell it in different ways across different cultures, but the essence is always the same. It goes like this. An old man is walking along a beach with his grandson. A storm has just passed and the beach is covered with thousands of starfish, washed up by the waves, dying in the sun. As far as the eye can see, starfish everywhere. The boy begins to pick them up one by one and throw them back into the ocean. The old man watches for a while and then says, "Boy, there are thousands of them. You can't possibly make a difference." The boy picks up another starfish, looks at it for a moment, throws it back into the ocean and says, "Made a difference to that one." I've heard that story described as a story about helping others. But today I want to give you a different interpretation. You are both the boy and the starfish. There are 1,000 voices, 1,000 circumstances, 1,000 reasons why the change you want is impossible. The storm has been fierce. The odds look overwhelming. You look at all the evidence of how much is against you and you think, "I can't possibly make a difference. I can't possibly turn this around. There are too many." But what if you just focused on one decision, one moment, one step, not the whole beach, just the starfish, right here, right now. What is the one thing you can do today, not tomorrow, today, that moves you one step closer to the person you're trying to become? What is the one conversation you can have, the one habit you can begin, the one thought pattern you can interrupt and replace, the one person you can reach out to, the one promise you can make to yourself and keep? Attitude is not built in grand gestures. It is built in these small, daily, consistent choices that seem insignificant in the moment, but compound into something magnificent over time. It is built in the morning when you choose to think about what's possible before you think about what's wrong. It is built in the afternoon when you fail and you choose to ask, "What did I learn?" instead of what's wrong with me. It is built in the evening when you lie down and choose gratitude instead of resentment, forward looking instead of backward dwelling, peace instead of anxiety. Not because life is perfect, but because your inner life is yours to govern and you choose to govern it. We are coming to the end of this time together, and I want to leave you with something that I hope becomes the sentence you return to in the moments when it's hardest. Are you ready? Here it is. My attitude is my greatest asset, and I will never stop investing in it. Say it with me, not out loud if you don't want to, but in your heart. Let it settle into the deepest part of you. My attitude is my greatest asset, and I will never stop investing in it. Not my talent, not my looks, not my connections, not my education, not my circumstances, my attitude. The one thing that is completely, entirely, always mine. The one thing no storm can wash away, no person can steal, no failure can permanently destroy, no circumstance can take if I refuse to give it. Your attitude has carried you through things you thought would kill you. Your attitude has found pathways in what looked like dead ends. Your attitude has woken you up on mornings when you wanted to stay in bed and pulled you forward into a day that turned out to matter. Your attitude has been fighting for you every single day of your life, even on the days you didn't know it. Now I'm asking you to fight for it, to protect it, to invest in it, to feed it with stories of triumph, to surround it with people who believe, to use it to serve something larger than yourself, to choose it deliberately, consciously, every day as the lens through which you see your life. Because here's the final truth. The last thing I want you to hold on to as you walk out of this room today. Life is uncertain. The future is unwritten. There will be storms you cannot predict and losses you cannot prepare for and challenges that bring you to your knees. There will be days when nothing works and nobody sees you and the path forward is completely invisible. And on those days, on the hardest, darkest, most doubt-filled days of your life, you will have one choice that is always available to you, one freedom that cannot be taken, one power that remains when everything else is stripped away. You can choose your attitude. You can choose to believe that this is not the end. You can choose to look for the lesson rather than living in the loss. You can choose to take one step when taking one step is the only thing left. You can choose to say, I am still here. And while I'm here, I'm going to make something of it. That is attitude. At its most raw, most real, most powerful expression. That is what separates the ones who rise from the ones who stay down. That is what separates the life that matters from the life that merely passes. That is what separates the person you were yesterday from the person you are capable of becoming. And it is yours, right now, in this moment, without needing anything to change, without needing permission, without needing the circumstances to improve first. You don't wait for life to get better before you bring your best attitude. You bring your best attitude and watch life get better in response. So walk out of here today differently than you walked in. Walk out knowing that you carry inside you the single most powerful tool that any human being has ever possessed. Walk out knowing that every great person who has ever lived, every champion, every leader, every artist, every entrepreneur, every ordinary person who did extraordinary things, they had this in common with you. They chose their attitude. And so will you. So will you go change your world? Because your attitude is already changing you. Thank you.